Welcome back, everybody, to the Let's Talk Vibes podcast, where we speak soul contracts, illuminating the path to higher understanding. In this episode, we're going to do a deep dive into the number 11-2, which is a powerful number all about structure. And we're joined by Gellyahnah to help explain this really crucial number, foundational number.
I'm excited to be here. And my 11-2 sits in my soul destiny. So for me, it legitimately is the infrastructural important frequency of this entire incarnation.
I love it.
Yeah. For me, I have it in my birth name. It's spiritual talent. In my common use name, it's the soul destiny. And in my new optimized name, it's in both goal positions. So I feel like I've just called in a bunch more 11-2 energy when I talk to people in the soul contract system. It's like, ooh, building. I'm like, yep, it's time to build.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. I have it in my birth name, spiritual goals. And then it's like all throughout all my other names, my common names throughout my whole life. But it's funny, as we get into the 11-2 is all about structure, right?
Mm-hmm.
For me, I need structure. Like I need it, like I need air. And going into from like a 5D business to, I'm sorry, from a 3D business to 5D, right? Soul contracts. That's like what I do every day, just like we do. And it's like, you have to create your own structure. And for me, that's so much more important. So when we optimized my name, Nicholas ended up getting an 11-2 in my spiritual talents. And he's like, but he had like two options. He's like, which one do you prefer? I'm like, no, I need the structure. So that 11-2 needs to get in there because I need to like find that structure. I know that word. I need it. It's so important to me. I thrive in it. But anyway, okay, let's get into.
Well, last thing on that structure, because Yana, I think it's something that makes our partnership really good, is that we do both need that. And so we can both kind of say to each other in the moment, okay, I need my 11-2 needs to understand the structure and we each get it. It's like, okay, let's get into it. Like we can just say that to each other. And so I think it's one of the reasons we do work really well together. I just had to, before we jump in, I was just wanted to put that out there. So yes, we're talking about this number. It's about structure. It's a builder energy, as I said. But also, as we talk about so much with any of these numbers, if it's a challenge, that means you're often starting from a place where that is lacking. So we see that with a lot of people that if they have an 11-2 that's either in karma, maybe in goals or soul destiny, you may actually feel like you're lacking a lot of internal structure. So for yourself, Gellyahnah, since it is your soul destiny, how does that show up for you?
Well, I think like with all the frequencies, this one shows up in many different layers.
Yeah.
And I think one of the biggest aspects of this frequency, before we even talk about structure, is that it comes with one of the most difficult lessons out of all the frequencies, which is death to life.
Yes.
Right. So this frequency is all about experiencing losses. And, it could stem all the way from, maybe just losses of friends, losses of a job, a business, all the way to losing loved ones.
Yeah.
And possibly even having your own near-death experiences. So it has this range of extreme of losses. And so the deeper challenge here is, well, we're talking about building in structures, but all of that will fall away if you're not building them from the core of who you are and your truth. So to me, the bigger theme here is introspection of your own truth and then figuring out how to build on that. Right. So for me, as I reflect back on my life, personal structure is always difficult for me. Like, I'll go to the gym consistently for like 3 months and then forget it. Then like one little structural thing kicks it off and I'm done. Like, oh, I didn't go to the gym 2 times this week, forget it. Like everything is going out the window, right?
That's so me. Yes.
Yeah, it's because that, so in cases like that, I mean, it just really never, it doesn't get, I don't know if it gets better. It doesn't get better. I think it gets better maybe like when I was married. and I was living with my, now ex-husband, he provided a lot of that more masculine structure in the household. So it was almost easier. Okay, I'll just eat on his schedule. I'll go to the gym on his schedule, right? But that's what the 11-2 is, because they don't have their own structure.
They're codependent on someone else. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but things like that, are they trivial? To a degree? Yeah. Right. I mean, if I really wanted to get to the gym, well, and what I've found, okay, going with the gym example, I forced myself to get back into the structure. So it's not like I couldn't do it. It's just really easy to fall off. Right. And that's just one example. Obviously, there's many more life examples. So that sort of structure has always been a challenge. However, when it comes to building systems, I am like the queen of building systems. And so it's just like my brain just gets it. I understand the language. I understand how things need to fit. And I've noticed myself, especially more lately, almost go into a trance-like state when I'm building a new system. So much so that when I go back, like if I have to add something or edit something, I'm like, how the heck did I do this? Like, I don't even understand. But I remember, I'm like, because I was in that trance and I was like, this goes here, this goes here. This, and, so it's almost like to get back into that, to understand how I even build that structure, a system, maybe a new website or launching a new course. I mean, that kind of a system. I have to go back and literally trace my own steps because I don't even know how I did it.
Yep. And that 11-2, right? That structure that is beautiful it is this beautiful builder of business energy. So depending on where you have it in your chart, that may be something that just comes to you so easily. And I relate to you on that too. It's funny because when Lauren and I were doing, starting off the podcast, it's like, okay, what's your strength? What's your strength? And I was like, I'm going to build a website. And I think like within like a day or two, like of, a few hours of putting it together, it like came together so naturally. And people look at it, they're like, how did you do that so fast? I'm like, I don't know. It just like in my mind, it just makes sense. But it's something that like people could take forever to do or may not even be able to do. They're like, forget it, I give up. But I'm wired that same way too. And it's that entrepreneurial spirit where you're just like, oh, I have this idea and I'm just going to just build it. And literally you're starting from nothing. And it just comes together. It just happens. It's wild.
Yeah. Does either one of you have 6s in your charts?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have
so
15-6. Yeah.
15-6. Okay. So I find that the 11-2 and 6-6 combination in someone's chart, they're entrepreneurs. I mean, they just are. And even if they're not, like, they don't have their own company, they have some sort of an entrepreneurial drive, and, they may or may not realize it yet, but I was doing a reading for somebody recently, this guy, and he had a few other business frequencies, but he had this 11-2, 6-6, and he had dominant 6s, so 4 6s. And I asked him what he did, but long story short, he was quitting his job to become an entrepreneur. And when he told me he's quitting his job, first off, I was shocked. I told him that. I'm like, I'm a little shocked you have a job. I'm like, I don't even know how you've lasted this long. But he was miserable. And of course he was miserable because that's not his energy, but he was 35. I turned 35 and I quit. He literally, as we were doing the reading, he's like, I put my notice in, I'm leaving at the end of the month. And I'm like, good, you're 35. You're finally stepping into it.
Right on time.
Build. Yeah. So the 11-2, it's interesting with the 6s, it's that business drive. Right. Yeah. And then with other combinations, it could speak to other structures, like the structure of the house, or meaning like, how do we build our home, and relationships with people. I mean, these are the things I sort of look at. I'm like, okay, what is it combined with?
Right.
And go from
And then
there.
if it's in your physical placement too, physical talent, karma, goal, it is more like of a physical tangible business, where if you have it like in your spiritual, like soul destiny or spiritual goals, you're here to build your own structure, but it's a structure of truth. It's like this philosophy. It's like, it's almost like you're able to like take information from like a bunch of different places, and you riff through like what doesn't feel right for you, it doesn't feel like your truth, and you're able to build your own structure of what resonates with you and what feels like that truth, and then you are here to just share it. Right. It's like, it's not just about holding on to it, but it's like, oh, I have this thing that I believe in that I feel like rings so true and so perfectly, and I need to share it, you know,
Yeah.
and it's like people just have that drive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, what I think of, because like, yes, the structure of truth, that's true. But I also see it a lot, especially when it comes to, a lot of people that I work with who are, spiritual and, practicing different modalities. Maybe they're just starting and I see the 11-2 and maybe 5. So I'm like, you're probably going to create your own modality and that's what you're going to teach to people one day. So like, that's how I see it. Like it can be the structure of truth. And, you might not be creating a new modality, but that's what I tend to think of some of the times when I see it in people's charts. It's like, especially the types of people that I'm in communities with. I'm like, I'm excited to see what you do one day. I'm like, you're doing all these different things now. And I think, I kind of think that because that's probably how it is for me. Right. So when you have the spiritual talent, like I do, one of the things it says is that you're able to kind of take the information that's presented to you and you find a deeper level of truth, right? So it's like, yeah, you're taking what does this, philosophy or religion or what do all these things say? And then how can you put that together in a different way? So that is, right? That is obviously structure of truth. Um, but then for some people, I think it is turns into like actual teaching of courses and creating something that they're then going to teach and teach the teachers of, which is again that 5 energy. So that's something that's always exciting and it makes me I get excited to see what comes for their future. It's like I can't wait to see what you're going to do with this.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, we did skim over really quickly the near-death experiences. Anybody have any near-death experiences? Either of
I
you?
mean, not like
Oh.
serious, like I remember being in middle school and there was like, like a car accident me and my mom were in that was definitely not as serious as it could have been. And like when I heard about the energy, like that's what I think of, but it certainly was not like a near death experience. I
Right.
think for me, it's shown up, and I've shared this already on the podcast, and I've shared even more of the story on my Instagram of my uncle's death when he passed very suddenly in a cycling accident. Like none of us knew that morning that he was going to pass away. So that's the way that I think of it, especially for our family and so many of my family members, like extended family, like the cousins and the aunts, my grandmother, like we all have 11-2s in our charts. And I'm kind of just like, that's a way that energy manifested for all of us.
Yeah.
Well, I've
Yeah.
had something that, again, like how you categorize that near-death experience can be
Yeah.
tricky, but before I was even 5 years old, let me break it down. By the time I was 1, I fell down a flight of stairs, ended up in the hospital. By the time I was 1.5, I fell out of a moving car. Listen, in the 80s, they weren't really like car seats and all that stuff. Seatbelts were like, oh, if you put it on, you put it on. And my father must have been working on the car or something. And then my grandmother, a little bit later, wanted to go to the bank. And so she's like, come with me. She puts me in the front seat, front passenger seat, no seatbelt. And she starts driving. And then she comes around. Now, this is a story that I've been told, okay? She comes around a turn, and as she turns, the passenger door flies open and I go like tumbling out.
Oh my
And
God.
at that point, the only thing that they'll tell me that my family has ever told me is that you were so black and blue. Like at the hospital, there was no way, like you were unrecognizable. How like you even survived was wild. And then when I was about 5 years old, I got ran over by this red pickup truck. It's like I can see it right now in my mind again, which was also denied to me most of my life. So it's like when I think of this 11-2 and that near death, I'm like, oh, that was the first 5 years of my life. It was just so wild. And it is insane how many people have this frequency, but have had experiences like that. And it's such a wild thing to connect to a frequency, but it's a thing. It's wild.
Wow. I'm so glad you're here to tell us about this.
I know. I'm like, what?
Yeah. Wow, that's
It's
crazy.
crazy.
I haven't had anything quite that intense. I have fallen down flights of stairs
Oof.
multiple times, actually. Once when I was 1, and of course I don't remember that one. And once when I was 6, and I remember that one. I mean, because I was already 6, and I remember running up the stairs like I was racing with my you know, with the kids, like we were, who's going to get first to the desk? And I ran up the stairs and I was taking my jacket off. And so my arms were behind me. And I
Oh,
got to the very top and I tripped and went tumbling down with my hands behind me, and my face hit every single
oh,
cement step on the way down.
Oh no.
Yeah. So like, I mean, it was like somebody had punched me, right? I mean, because it was like I couldn't open my mouth, I couldn't close my mouth, I couldn't chew, it was awful. So I remember that. And then there's this infamous story how my uncle, who's 13 years older than me, he put me on his shoulders when I must have been a year. And he was like, you know, walking around or like dancing with me, and he let go of me and he thought I was holding on and I wasn't. And I let go and I fell flat on my back and head. You know, and he's like 6 foot or something. I don't know. Right. Like, so I stopped breathing, apparently. That's the story. So yeah, people ask me if I've ever had a traumatic head injury, and I'm like, probably
Yeah.
a few. You know, like, this was also in the Soviet Union. Nobody was tracking, you know,
Right.
head injuries. So that could have been from my 11-2s. I mean, hearing you say that, I'm like, oh, I guess I never even really thought about that. I mean, because they're not in my memory. I mean, all I really remember was pain from that one fall. But I'll tell you, for me, my 11-2 and my biggest losses in life, and I speak to this a lot, came also when I turned 35, because that's when the infrastructure of my entire life, as I knew it back then, fell away. So I had to rebuild, I mean, literally from everything, because I was with somebody for 17 years. So we were married for 10 together, you know, for 7 before. And he was also my business partner in the company that I launched when I was 27. Right. So my entrepreneurial spirit was with me from a young age.
Always.
Yeah. So I launched my first company at 27, and he was my technical co-founder. So when we split up, it was a personal divorce. It was a business divorce. I met him at 17. So at 34, like 35, I'd never been
Right.
on
It's
my
all you
own as an
knew.
adult.
Yeah.
And I had a daughter at that point. You know, I remember having to find like a place to live, you know, my own apartment and things like that. It was just, I mean, I had to rebuild literally the entire infrastructure. And I remember thinking, I don't know how much I cost a month. Like literally, I don't know how much I cost to live. Like what is my car payment? What is my health insurance? What, like all of these things I had to go and figure out. And the places where I'll still get tripped up today is where I don't have an infrastructure. You know, so life keeps showing me, build your infrastructure.
Yeah.
And so if I get lazy about something, or I'm like, I don't want to do this, can somebody else just do this for me? Maybe it'll work for a moment. But then I have the 12-3s also. So a 12-3 tidal wave will come in and boom, anything that doesn't have an infrastructure gets smacked, you know? So it's like life's like, I told you to build that. You didn't do it then, you're going to have to do it now. So, yeah. So the losses for me, and also, I mean, the divorce, of course, that was a huge loss. Well, not, you know, I mean, a loss is in like the infrastructure.
Right. It's like a rebirth of
Yeah.
yourself. You know, it's like that dark night of the soul, if you will. It's like it's a complete death, literally death to life, death to rebirth.
Yeah.
And it's like you're rocked down to your foundation. Everything crumbles. And now you have to rebuild brick by brick your own structure, your own, you know, and I get it. Look, I also have been divorced, and that in itself, while I have always had that personal structure, it is still, I mean, I had a 1.5-year-old. It's still like this new, like figuring out life now as a single mother, you know, I remember once that was settled, that divorce was settled, I went through a huge dark night of the soul. I didn't even know that I was going through it. And like halfway through, I was like, what is happening? And what happened was I had this beautiful daycare business, and I would wake up all of a sudden. This was last January. I would wake up and I'd be like, oh, I don't want to go to work today. And I'm like, that's weird. Because when I wake up, it's a good day and I'm good to go every single day. My daycare business has been like joy. In my mind, all I ever kept thinking was expansion, expansion, expansion. And then day after day. And what's important about the twos, when the 11-2 we haven't talked about is that emotional resiliency, right? So for me, it's like when I get a thought, an idea, I'll just act on it immediately. So when I feel like I don't want to do something anymore, my initial reaction is to go, I'm done. I'm out of here. Well, because this was my business, my income, it was everything. I was like, okay, take a second, Yiannah, and just sit with it and see how it goes. And I will tell you that by March or April, it was like, I'm done. The feeling was, I'm done. And I'm like, this is wild. This was the plan for the rest of my life. This was just building. And now I'm leaving this dream that I've always had. The dream was crushed and devastated, and I wanted nothing to do with it. And then by June of last year, I was officially done. And then that's how kind of like I got into the soul contracts, and I was like, this will be my next thing. The passion was there. Gellyahnah, you are the reason why I even know about soul contracts or love soul contracts. I actually saw you on Nicole Frolick's podcast. And it was an episode that was old. And randomly, like I had YouTube on and it just like popped up. And I think I'm going to call myself out here. I like making puzzles. Okay, like jigsaw puzzles. I was making a puzzle, okay? And it came on, and usually I'll stop an episode before it begins because I really want to know what it's about. And I was like, I'll just let it play. And then you come up and you pull up this chart on the screen. And I was like, oh my God, I need to know everything about this. I ordered the book immediately. It called to me and I was like, I need to do that. And then it wasn't shortly after I booked a reading with you, and you were like booked out for a while. And I was like, I have to wait. Like, I think it was maybe like a month or something. I'm like, I got to wait this long, something like that. Meanwhile, I found Nicholas's website and trainings, which was coming on a little, like the level 1 was starting a little bit after that. And I was like, well, I know I'm going to do this. So I'm just going to wait for Gellyahnah's reading and also do the training and just get going because I can't help myself. Anyway, so listen, I appreciate you for that. And what a full circle moment that here I am with you and Lauren. And it's like, oh, you are where it started for me. So thank you.
That's so beautiful.
I love that story. I mean, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. I've had that experience with a few people, you know, where we do the reading, they love the work, they take Nicholas's class and they're practitioners. And I think it's like, it's the coolest thing ever. I'm like, good. Like, I'm glad you found your calling it. I'm glad you listened to it, right? Because so many people ask me, well, what, you get a soul contract reading and then what? I'm like, I don't know. Then what? It's up to you. Like, you know, because some people are they're in resistance. Like, they don't even resonate with what you're saying because they're just like, no, that's not me. Or, you know, it just really depends on the phase of life that everybody's in. So the fact that you were ripe and ready and you were right there, that's incredible. Because 35, you know, my business, I actually had the opportunity to leave the old business when I was 35 because that's when the divorce came through. But my ego was like, no, because I was so attached to business, right? And so we know, right, everything happens in 7-year cycles. So I actually had that business for 14 years. And the first 7 years were a dream come true. And the next 7 years were a complete nightmare.
Yeah.
So when I turned 40, I was like, okay, we're done. So for me, that moment was like when I turned 40, but also I didn't have this work in front of me when I was 35, right? Like, I didn't know what else would I do. And I didn't discover until I was 38. And by the way, 38 is
11.
And 30 in that 7-year cycle, like I speak to this a lot, in that 7-year cycle, I think 38 is the most difficult year because it's the year of complete deconstruction of your life. That's what happened to me.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, you know, again, when I do readings and talk about this in social media, people resonate with that. So even if they don't have an 11 in their chart or 11-2, you know, come 38, deconstruction.
Yeah. I see. For me at 38, it was the birth side of it. That's when I had my daughter. And it was at 40 that I said, I'm done with my business. And 40, it was, and it was the 7th year of my business. So, connecting those dots is so wild because it's just constant validation of like, how powerful and how accurate this stuff is. And it's not something that you need to like live by your soul contract and then just like every decision you make off of it. No, but it is such a beautiful tool to help guide you. And it's like, if you could just see it just for that, it will make a world of difference. A world of difference. It's wild. It's wild.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so glad you corrected. I don't know why you said you were 35. I was like aging you the other way, you know,
Oh,
making
that's
you
okay.
I misheard. Okay. But I'm glad you clarified, but you're right. That totally makes sense. 40, right? Because 40 is that other big transformational year.
Yeah.
You know, when we turn 40, it's the gateway of transformation. So yeah, a lot of people, if they don't get it by 40, 40 and up is not fun.
And let's just remind everyone as we talk about this 35, Yiannah and I talked about it in one of our early episodes, but it's, from 35 to 42, again, 7-year cycle. This is often that 7-year cycle where often we see people transitioning from the physical triangle dominance into spiritual triangle dominance is also one of the kind of important things about those ages in this system. So for anyone who forgot that or hadn't listened to those episodes, that's part of why we see some significance there. And, I want to circle back to this conversation on the life to death, because I'm realizing one part of that we haven't really stated, that when you have those sudden losses, and I really want to emphasize the sudden, whether that is, loss of a relationship, friendship, romantic, of a person in your life, them literally losing their lives, your own near-death experience. One of the reasons this happens is because as a result of that sudden loss or near loss is how much you are able to evolve and grow and expand. It's like a metamorphosis. And it's really interesting that you both have shared stories of your divorce, right? So last week we talked to Jenny and about the 10-1, and we talked about 10-1 being a divorce number. Well, here we're now talking about the 11-2, the structure, the rebuilding of the structure that happens after a divorce. And if you can think back to our 12-3 episode, which will obviously come after 11-2, that's the expansion. So I love, again, to be able to look at these numbers and how they're all feeding off of each other and being, Yiannah, you're a puzzle lover, right? Pieces to these puzzles. How are these pieces fitting together? Because it's one thing to look at them individually and to understand that piece, but to start to see how it all connects. It's like, okay, the divorce and then the crumbling of the structure and then the expansion that happens after that. And that's the thing I think we hadn't quite mentioned yet before. That's really important in terms of why does the soul choose to have this experience? Why would the soul choose to lose people really suddenly? Because you will grow so much as a result of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's really important. When I have clients that have experienced losses of, children, spouses, parents they were really close to. And this is important that, to explain to them. And most of them, they know, because the moment you say, well, part of the reason why we lose people is because of the rapid expansion. And they're like, oh yeah, because the moment you lose somebody, they start searching for meaning of life and truth. And it is just very quickly, they begin to find it. And then they end up with a soul contract practitioner, getting their reading done. But yeah, that is a really important part of the 11-2. I love my 11-2. Like I get a lot of clients or people. I feel like sometimes people are like, oh, all these losses, I constantly have to rebuild and this. And I'm like, yeah, but when you build from your truth, you don't have to. So if you're constantly rebuilding, it's because you're not in your truth. I love my 11-2 because I feel like my 11-2 allows me to build and build. And in my whole life, I'm building. Like I'm always building. Like if I look back at my life, like I'm constantly building something, businesses, communities, systems, structures, building. And I enjoy it and I love it. And then coupled with my 6, that's how I express my creativity. So I think the other part of the 11-2 that we have not mentioned, it's really more on the 2 side, is the processing. Because the 11-2, they process everything for everybody, right? So this is what makes them great therapists. When I see the combination of 11-2-7-7, I'm like, you're everyone's unofficial therapist. You know, and they're like, how did you know? I'm like, because you see, you magnetize people to you, and then you process all their crap for them for free. You might as well get paid for this. So the 11-2s, these are the 2 part of it. They process things, they hold space for people, they You know, and this is where we can also get ourselves in trouble a little bit, especially as we're children. We process our family's crap, like
Right.
the traumas, the yelling, I mean, whatever's going on, you know, within 11-2's family. But the 11-2's, they process all of that. So it's important to understand that we are processors. We're not going to stop being processors. And then this is, it just depends. Do you have good boundaries or not good boundaries? And that's where some of the boundary frequencies come in. So
Yeah. And then also that major lesson for that too is that foolishness to wisdom, right? It's about maybe earlier in your life, you probably made foolish decisions, quick, emotional, acting on emotion. That was something that was so like natural to me. It would just be like, this is how I feel. That's what I'm going to do. And also it's very much like that. For example, I love this example. It's like when you go shopping, you're at a store and you just want to buy everything, but it's like, do you really need that thing? Do you really need all these things that you want to constantly buy? And it's about sitting back and going, do I really need it? Can I afford it? What's the budget? What difference is going to make in my life? And I know it's like so trivial, but it is all about like that coming into making those wise decisions, not hanging with the wrong crowd, not acting on emotions, not doing things just because someone tells you. It's about when things pop up, take a step back and go, okay, looking at the situation, every like perspective from every point of view and being like, what decision can I make for the best possible outcome? And stepping into that wise aspect. So when I do see this 11 too, I'm always like, oh, you're like that wise, like do people call you wise? Like you're that wise old soul that just knows the thing to say, you know, you're good with like making decisions or like not making decisions, but like giving and not advice,
objective
but like
advice.
totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that's what the 2's do. They give that objective advice because
totally.
of the spring, the up and down in life.
Yeah. So I will say personally, stepping into that emotional resiliency, stepping into that wise aspect, I'm like, oh my God, the amount of heartache I could have saved, the amount of money I could have saved, the amount of everything that I didn't have to do because I was making foolish decisions, I could be a totally different person today. But I love who I am. But the point is, it's like stepping into that knowledge and understanding like, oh, I can wait to react and make a wise decision at all times. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, very similar to the processing that you're talking about with the 2, the 11 has this assimilation aspect. So as you're talking about, you know, the processing the trauma from your family, you know, the 11s, they're assimilating. And that's one of the lessons we talk about is you need to learn to discern what you're assimilating and what not. And have you taken on other people's structures that aren't yours, that don't serve you, right? That's certainly part of the process as well. And one thing that can happen, and this is certainly, I think, how it manifested for me, or it is how it manifested for me, is that 11-2s, they can struggle in school, especially early in life. That structure, they struggle with the structure. They struggle to assimilate and to learn. And so when I was a kid, you know, I had a learning disability. And so I really struggled in elementary school. I just always say, like, I sucked at school. You know, my favorite subject was lunch, right? Like, I wasn't athletic. I didn't like PE. I wasn't artistic. I didn't like art. I wasn't good at math or science, certainly reading. That was my worst, right? And so much of my self-esteem and self-worth was so lowered by how much I struggled in school. And you know, again, it was so validating to find the system and just be like, oh, okay, that's why, you know, this was part of that experience. This was just part of that energy. And I just wanted to experience that. And, you know, it's the sort of thing as well that even like in high school, and by that time I was doing really well academically, but I remember, I think it was like algebra 2 or something like that. Like every time for every new thing we were learning, when we would do the quiz, I would get like a C. I would not do very well. And then just like right before the test, a week or two later, it would click and I would do well. But it was just like that midway point, I was like, I'm not getting it yet. And that I think is so quintessential of this 11 energy of like, it's like so intelligent, but it takes time to learn. And so you feel unintelligent. You can feel really unintelligent because it's just, you're slow at learning.
Yes. Yes. And I had the same experience with school. Like I just did not get it. I was so slow. And then I was just made to feel so stupid. Like that was, my parents were amazing at making me feel completely stupid. They did their job so well. But yeah, come to find out as I was older, I was like, I'm not stupid. I'm just a little bit slow. But it's like, I literally had to come to that realization. I was like, I bet you if I take these math classes now, I would be one of the top students. Like
Yes.
now, you know, it just takes, and my parents pushed me in all the honors classes, and the honors class, they would move much faster, like math, right?
Yep.
I'm like, I just can't remember this fast enough. So I struggled with school as well. And even to this day, I know I'm slow. Like it's interesting because I have this like knowing in my brain, like I am intelligent and I can figure anything out. I know this. Like it's not a self-talk thing. It's like I just know it because that's how I function. I also know I don't understand things easily or quickly. I make a lot of mistakes. I have to do something over and over. And then all of a sudden one day I'm like, what am I doing? This is like the most obvious thing. How am I not getting
It clicks.
Right? It just clicks. So it's this and it's constant. And so I've had to just come to this point where I'm like, okay, I'm just slow at learning things, and it is what it is. And that's my 11-2. So my daughter has an 11-2 in her physical karma. So,
but how beautiful for her that you are aware of what that actually means, and you can assist her in a way where opposite from your parents, where you know how to help her. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But what I was going to say is, you know, the children will bring in the karma that we haven't worked through yet. Right. And so a lot of what I'm learning through like her having that karma, so the way that she is and the way that I am and the way it sort of comes together, you know, I have to have more of this emotional resilience, the non-reactive, she's just going to be slower at certain things, and I'm just going to have to, I already told you 100 times, but I will tell you 100 more, right? She's over here watching me right now. Telling you about your 11-2. Yes, I know you can hear me. So it's been fascinating for me to see how I've had to work through my shadow aspects of it still. It's forcing me to understand it deeper. Right. So it's there's, and I don't even know what else is yet to come of it. She's only 11. Oh, how perfect. She's 11. We're talking about the 11.
Yes.
But, and also hers is in a different placement than mine.
Right.
So that it does play out a little bit differently. And I'll tell you, she's brilliant. Like not a problem for her.
Yeah.
She understands, like she just last night, she built this whole Lego thing that's for 18 and up.
Oh my goodness.
Over 1,500 pieces in 2 days. And she put together this entire train that moves.
Get it, girlfriend.
She, I bought a bike rack, and I had a bike rack I bought for my car, and I couldn't figure out how to put it on. She figured it out. She's like, here's the video. She climbed underneath my car. She attached it. I'm like, what are you doing? She figured it out. I ordered this little stool, and I was literally, it was just sitting there because I'm like, I don't even want to put this, I don't want to have to think about putting it together. I asked her to do it. I left the room, I came back, it was done.
Nice.
Shoe rack. So like it really, I don't know, hers is more physical, like you said, Yiannah, right? So in the physical sense, she can build things very easily in the physical sense.
And that it is really the number that I would most associate with an architect or an engineer. Like, absolutely. Like, I love, and it's, you know, again, it's so validating for us as practitioners just to hear when someone is such a quintessential case. It's like, that's exactly what I would expect.
Totally. Yeah. Now I'm going to tie in the 11-2, but how you said that our children usually show up with our karma. So I have a 6-6 physical karma and an 8-8 spiritual karma. Okay. My daughter, who by the way, I named before I knew about the soul contract system, has 6 6s she's got double 6 in both karmic placements, and her soul destiny is an 8. Right. So my 6 and 8s are in her chart. Okay. So here we are, like 6-6 karmic clash. Right. So thank you, soul contract system, because I'm able to now work with her in a way where we don't have to do this. Right. And I could be patient and, you know, anyway, what's interesting is in her common birth name. And you guys, I don't know why I never put it into C. I had her birth name, but then not too long ago, I put in her common birth name. She has 3 11 twos. They're scattered. And
Wow.
I was like, this makes so much sense because when I had my daycare business, obviously she was there with me all day. Okay. She like got things so fast. She'd be color matching at like 9 months. And I'm like, what are you doing? That's not like a thing that a kid your age does. She will do like your daughter built that train set, the Legos. My daughter will do like this huge puzzle, like a jigsaw, just like me, where it's like everything she does is like for older kids, but you show her that one time and she just gets it. And it's so wild to see. But I will say, she resists structure, but she thrives in structure. So I have to be the parent who's just like bad cop. In this house, we respect, we clean up, we do this, we do that. Like we don't yell at mama, like that whole thing. And at first she will try to resist it. And then she'll be like, okay, mama, and then she will like kind of like I don't want to say fall in line because that sounds terrible, but like she will kind of like get back on her structure. And that is when I see she thrives the most. So there is this beautiful validation. And it is also one of those where I think to myself, okay, when it comes to school, if that is something where she has to read something 100 times for her to get it, then we're going to sit there 100 times for her to get it and be okay with it, because understanding that is such a beautiful way of being able to work with and help your children. And what a beautiful gift the soul contracts offers because of that element alone. If parents could just realize and see that element alone, that is worth every penny. That is worth everything. That is just worth peace of mind on how your child operates and how you can best assist them. Yeah. So those 11 twos, I was like, oh my God. Okay. I get it. And one odd thing that's associated with the 11-2 in a karmic placement is late development, late like puberty. You're like a late bloomer. Now I can't speak to both of you, but I was a total late bloomer. I mean, I've stepped into my womanhood, but total late bloomer where like everyone else, every other girl in school had their period, had like these breasts, and here I am like nothing. Nothing. And it's tough at that age. You're in 7th, 8th grade, and like you're just like the one who just hasn't developed. And as an adult, you can see how silly that is. But as a child, it's hard to go through. But it's just such an odd thing to connect to a frequency. And here we are.
Yeah, no, it is odd. And I mean, she's only 11, but I can tell she's already behind, the class. So I can attest to that. And also autism is associated with it.
That is something for me as well that I have always thought about, that the 11-2 and the autism, and then like the 6 or the 15-6 and like more on the ADHD side, but certainly both like being neurodivergent. So I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think about that, right? Because again, structure, and you think about people with autism or who are autistic, and it's like they can really struggle with creating those structures themselves. Like they sometimes need that created for them, but also really like need structure. Will also struggle when that structure isn't present, but then can struggle to create it themselves. They need that force kind of helping them to create it.
Yeah. Well, and also, I mean, it's just, I think that in addition to that, their brain is different. And that's what the 11-2 is. It's a different processor.
Yeah.
So they're processing everything differently. And especially when it's in the physical karma, it's associated with your mind or like something with you physically. I've seen that. But I've seen people with autism and spiritual karma as well. So I've noticed that. And the 6-6, I want to say 99% of my clients that have 6s have ADD or ADHD or diagnosed or undiagnosed. I have 6s in my physical goals. My daughter has 6s in her physical goals. So that's another one of our awesome passions.
Hey, we're twins.
Yeah. But yeah, so that would, for sure. And then the 9 in karma can almost show up as anything that, with the this, I don't want to say like mental dysfunctions, but yeah, I mean, it could fall under that, but I almost feel like the 9 could be a catch-all in a lot of these things, but the 11-2 specifically, yeah.
Interesting. I
Wild.
love that I'm not the only one who sees that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's definitely a thing for sure. Anything else that we feel is important to mention about this beautiful 11-2?
I feel like we've covered all the things. Again, if someone has this number in their chart, I do always ask them, what are you building? Do you resonate with the idea that you're here to build something? Because I think, right now, collectively, right, there's a lot of our current structures that are crumbling, or many of us would like to see crumble. And so I think there are a lot of people existing in the world right now who have this energy because in big and small ways, they're here to build something that's going to be part of this new world that collectively we are all building.
Yeah, I agree. I will also say sometimes, I think sometimes the only thing they're building is their resiliency,
Mm,
True.
right? Because I mean, I have some, and this also depends culturally, because I have a lot of global clients, um, and I have a lot of clients in particular cultures where they don't have a shred of entrepreneurial energy in them, and they'll have 11 2s and 6s, and that tells me they're more here to build their resiliency. I mean, maybe they're meant to like be entrepreneurs, but the cultures they live in, it's almost like I don't think that's
right.
a thing
Yeah.
for them, right? It could be, but not right now. So it's almost more of like a resiliency, because they're kind of in survival mode cultures.
Yeah. Totally
So
true.
Now, my one last final thought, and this is going to tie into the statement you made, Gellyahnah, about maybe if I went back to school now, right? Okay, so I was always of the mindset that C's get degrees, because like you, it's like I can read something and I forget it. And I'm like a full page down and I'm like, I don't even know what I read and I have to reread it. Okay.
Mhm.
So I was totally, my first round in college, that's what I did. Well, as I continued my education as an adult, because I went back twice to get 2 more degrees, I was then the student who sat in the front, who paid attention, who took all the notes, who, if I got like a 90, I remember it was one paper, I got like a 92%. And I was pissed because I was like, 92, like I know this is a 100% paper. And my husband at the time, he was like, are you crazy? You got an A. And I'm like, no, it's a low A. It's A minus, whatever.
A-.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I thought to myself, man, what a complete turn around from when I was younger, trying to just push through school and just get through it. Again, I wasn't failing. I was a decent student, but I was no straight A. And then to come back as an adult where you're like, it's such a different mindset. And it's not that all of a sudden I could read something and retain it. It was just a shift. And you're able to just get those A's and just focus and succeed like at the top of your class. It's just hilarious, but it is very validating because that's the exact experience that I had. So it's just so funny.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, Gellyahnah, thank you so much for joining us today. It was such a pleasure, full circle moment for me. Please let our listeners know how they can find you.
Yeah, it really was so much fun to be here with you gals. Thank you for inviting me. So I think it's really easy to find me on the internet. I'm on Instagram. I'm Soul Contracts Practitioner, and it's just soul_contracts_practitioner. I don't think anyone's going to try to find me by my name, Gellyahnah, because it's phonetically spelled. But it's the same on TikTok, although I'm a little bit more active on Instagram right now. And my website is yoursoulscontract.com.
Beautiful.
Well, everybody, head over to Instagram, Let's Talk Vibes podcast, to let us know what you've thought of the 11-2 energy. Do you have this in your chart? Which parts of it really resonate for you? And if you need to know if you have an 11-2 in your chart, then of course, head over to our website, theltvpodcast.com, to get your free soul contract.
And as always, everybody, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment on our content. It is the best way to support us, and we greatly appreciate it. Have a beautiful, blessed day. Bye-bye.